I-17, Pacific Ocean. On the deck of a U.S. destroyer, the atmosphere changes in an instant. Music fades under the tension as the ship shifts into full combat readiness mode. Radar operators scan with precision. Sailors hear the order: lock on target, stay sharp. Why? Because a Chinese Type 815A surveillance ship has just moved dangerously close to a U.S. fleet formation, apparently believing it can quietly gather intelligence and slip away unnoticed. Its mission is clear: collect electronic signatures, study patterns, and help build a picture of how to challenge U.S. naval operations. But what Beijing doesn't realize is that within moments, the situation is about to turn completely upside down. What follows is the sound of electronic warfare pushing back. The U.S. Navy launches a response so effective that it leaves Chinese command stunned. A sharp and deeply embarrassing lesson delivered right near Guam. The Pacific is no longer a quiet corner of the world. Today, it feels more like Times Square at rush hour. And America is not operating alone. Japan, Australia, India, and the Philippines now form a dense and growing security network. And at the center of that network stands Guam, the strategic control tower of the entire region. Now let's talk about the Type 815A, China's high-tech listening ship. This vessel is designed for one purpose: to collect and analyze signals. It has enormous electronic ears, it operates quietly, and it observes from a distance. Its greatest strength is its ability to gather huge amounts of signal data across a wide area. But it also has a major weakness. It has very limited self-protection, and it depends almost entirely on its opponent continuing to emit signals. And that is exactly where the United States can take advantage. The moment America goes quiet, the Type 815A effectively loses its eyes. Inside the Combat Information Center of the USS George Washington, an officer presses the MCON button. Instantly, emission indicators, radar, communications, active systems switch to silence. In seconds, the fleet vanishes into electronic darkness. This is one of the U.S. Navy's classic and highly effective tactics, turning an entire force into an electronic ghost. So how can more than 100,000 tons of steel seem to disappear? To understand that, you need to understand the George Washington itself. The carrier is powered by two A4W nuclear reactors, each one essentially a compact power plant. Unlike conventional diesel-powered ships, it doesn't rely on loud engines. It has two nuclear cores that generate tremendous power with far less detectable mechanical noise. It can go years without refueling and sustain speeds above 30 knots without dramatic engine changes. That matters because when the U.S. shuts down radar, reduces communications, and cuts off detectable emissions, the carrier is already remarkably difficult to track from a distance. No signals, minimal noise, no radio chatter. It doesn't just hide, it blends into the ocean. And the United States doesn't rely on technology alone. It uses the environment like a sailor who knows these waters by instinct. The fleet was operating near Guam, and that morning, conditions strongly favored the Americans. Low-level fog reduced visual tracking. High humidity created interference for infrared sensors. A slight thermal inversion bent surface radar waves, making large vessels appear smaller than they really were. Even sea conditions helped soften the carrier's wake, one of the key clues drones and satellites often use to follow large ships. America didn't just switch off the lights, it switched them off at the exact moment when the sky, the sea, and the atmosphere all became part of the disguise. But the moment MCON was activated, China's Plan B was already moving. From a coastal base, a WZ-7 Soaring Dragon reconnaissance drone rolled down the runway and climbed into the sky. This high-altitude surveillance drone, with its distinctive tandem-wing design, is built to fly extremely high and stay airborne for long periods, up to 60,000 feet, where even the clouds can help conceal its movement. From that altitude, the WZ-7 began heading toward Guam, like a giant steel glider, silently observing the vast Pacific below. When electronic listening stopped working, China shifted immediately to direct observation. The drone's purpose was not just to look, it was to apply pressure, to force the U.S. into reacting, revealing a position, or switching on radar. Its goal was to detect the hidden American ships, track their movements, and identify weaknesses for the next move. And to be fair, the WZ-7 is a serious surveillance platform. Flying at nearly 65,000 feet, it can monitor hundreds of square kilometers, practically an entire naval operating area. From above, it can bypass many of the concealment advantages ships normally rely on. It can remain on station for hours, waiting patiently for a mistake. And its synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, can see through clouds and darkness, largely unaffected by weather. The US fleet may have gone dark, but the WZ-7 could still try to build the picture. Which raises the question, if the US wasn't emitting radar, who spotted the drone? More than 100 kilometers away, a P-3C Orion from the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force was conducting a routine patrol. Its APS-134 radar swept the ocean and picked up an unusual signature: the Chinese WZ-7 climbing into position. That information was immediately passed through the Link 16 network, and within seconds the drone's location appeared on American combat displays. This is something China still struggles to match: a network of allies that can see with you, think with you, and cover for you when needed. If the WZ-7 is the suspicious figure lingering outside the gate, then the Japanese P-3C is the neighbor whose security camera sees the entire street and tells you exactly who is there, what they're doing, and where they're headed. The warning is delivered. But the intruder doesn't realize it has already been noticed. Aware that something was happening, but unsure how much the US knew, the Type 815A tried one more probe. It released a small expendable decoy, hoping to lure an American radar into responding. It was a risky move, a last attempt to find out whether anyone was still listening. No one took the bait. The silence held. Then, from the flight deck of the USS George Washington, two EA-18G Growlers launched into the sky. Under their wings hung the ALQ-218 receiver pods and ALQ-99 jamming system. Tools designed not just to detect signals, but to manipulate the battle space itself. First, the ALQ-218 listened. It analyzed enemy radar frequencies, signal strength, scan patterns, and even the rhythm of radar pulses. Like a master musician identifying a single flute inside a full orchestra, it could isolate faint emissions in the middle of electronic clutter. Then the ALQ-99 went to work. It projected imitation radar returns, created false contacts, and distorted positions, making a single group appear like multiple carrier strike groups spread across the region. To Chinese operators, their displays suddenly became a wall of confusion. Once the Growlers reached the right altitude, they began a full-spectrum electronic performance: jamming, deception, phantom formations, and signal distortion. Chinese sensors were pulled into total disorder. This was not passive defense. It was a deliberate countermove aimed at disrupting the enemy's ability to make clear decisions. In that moment, the Growlers became illusionists in the sky. No missiles were fired, no bombs were dropped, and yet radar screens filled with ghosts. Instead of one hidden fleet, Chinese operators now saw what appeared to be 5 separate American carrier strike groups showing up in different places at once. Their system was flooded with false information, and distinguishing reality from deception became almost impossible. It was like standing in a hall of mirrors, unable to tell which doorway is real. And the US chose the moment perfectly. The waters around Guam are one of America's most deeply understood operating environments, monitored by undersea sensors, satellites, and generations of electronic reconnaissance. Since the Cold War, the US has studied the seabed, the atmospheric layers, and the regional air currents in extraordinary detail. That knowledge allowed the Growlers to use the environment itself to scatter and shape their signals, making Chinese radar's job even harder. At the same time, the Pacific afternoon often brings heavy fluctuations in the ionosphere. Normally, that is bad news for radar operators, but for the Growler, it became an advantage. While Chinese radar was already struggling with natural interference, the added layer of American electronic pressure pushed the entire picture into chaos. This exposed one of China's biggest vulnerabilities. Its surface radar systems are powerful, but they rely heavily on reflected signals. Distort those reflections, and their analysis starts to break down. The Growlers hit that weakness directly. And while the US, Japan, and Australia can exchange and compare information in seconds, China's systems are still slower when it comes to integrating multiple sources fast enough to break through complex deception. Its surveillance architecture is built to collect a massive amount of data, but it is not especially strong at filtering noise when the signal environment becomes overloaded. That is exactly what the Growlers exploited. They buried the system under so much conflicting information that China's ability to classify targets simply began to collapse. And beyond the machinery, there was another factor: human pressure. Because on the other side of every radar screen were real people making real decisions under extreme stress. One mistake could mean ignoring an actual threat, or wasting critical time chasing something that wasn't there. In the end, this high-tech confrontation came down to something very human: judgment under pressure. And while the Chinese ship was still caught in the confusion, a real American P-8 Poseidon patrol aircraft suddenly broke from the clouds, descending fast toward the vessel at low altitude. On board, the crew sprang into action. Radar operators worked urgently to separate real contacts from the phantom formations, while the captain ordered higher speed and evasive maneuvers. This was the final move, a decisive and very public reveal. The game was over. While the intruder was still lost in a maze of false reflections, the other side stepped forward, turned on the lights, and made one thing clear: you've been seen. That was the role of the P-8 Poseidon. Its cameras and sensors locked onto the Chinese vessel, recording every visible detail: hull markings, antenna layout, and movement patterns. In a last attempt to break contact, the Chinese crew tried to interfere with the P-8's sensors and changed course. But by then, it no longer mattered. The message was unmistakable and needed no words. We know you're here. We see what you're doing. And this round is over. With its cover blown and the mission effectively compromised, remaining in the area no longer made sense. The Type 815A slowly turned away, built up speed, and withdrew. On American displays, the red contact moved farther and farther from the area. China had little choice but to pull back. So what made the U.S. response so effective? First, the discipline of silence. American forces knew exactly when to go dark using MCON procedures, shutting down electronic emissions at the perfect moment. By doing that, they made an entire carrier strike group nearly invisible to the Type 815A's sensors. What looked like open water to the Chinese ship was, in reality, a fleet operating in plain sight. Present, ready, and fully aware, without giving away a single position. In that moment, silence became a strategic weapon. Second, the strength of allies. Coordination with Japan turned a routine patrol aircraft into an extension of the fleet's vision. Through Link 16, the P-3C Orion passed critical data almost instantly, helping create a layered defensive picture across the region. A single drone that might have challenged one force alone was now being tracked from multiple directions. That wasn't just cooperation, it was a force multiplier, and it showed how alliances can change the entire shape of an encounter. Third, control of the invisible battle space. The EA-18G Growlers, using ALQ-218 and ALQ-99 systems, manipulated the electromagnetic environment, creating phantom fleets while concealing real positions. In a matter of moments, the hunter became the confused observer. Chinese operators found themselves trapped in a flood of conflicting signals, unable to separate reality from illusion. With precise timing and careful execution, the U.S. turned deception into control, exposing the other side's weaknesses while revealing almost nothing of its own. Together, these elements created a layered strategy where discipline, advanced technology, and allied coordination all came together. The outcome was not just about military strength. It was about thinking several steps ahead, controlling the flow of information, and using the environment itself as part of the strategy. And that may be the biggest lesson of all. In the modern ocean, power is not measured only by visible force or dramatic confrontation. Real strength often lies in controlling information, shaping the situation long before any direct action begins. It lies in the confidence that comes from discipline, advanced systems, and reliable partners. It lies in the ability to disappear into the electromagnetic shadows, leaving the other side uncertain, overloaded, and reacting too late. And it lies in turning every move your opponent makes into a source of insight, while giving away almost nothing in return. But one question still remains. Will this kind of silent confrontation be enough to discourage future escalation? Or are we only watching the opening phase of a much more complex contest? One where drones, satellites, and digital deception make every move harder to read. Could the next encounter be even more unpredictable? Could it push strategy, patience, and human decision-making to entirely new limits? And in the end, what do you think? Will the era of invisible fleets and electronic dominance reshape naval power for good? Or will the next challenger find a way to turn the balance the other way?